sometimes you can love someone tremendously and have all the best intentions. Like, no one goes down the aisle and says, I'm gonna divorce this person in 5 years. Yet, it happens more often than not. So the intention is, I want to stay connected and in love and have this fairy tale marriage, and communication is one of those pieces that can drive a tremendous wedge in your relationship. So today we're going to dive into communication in marriage. Men and women communicate completely differently, right? And so we're going to talk about complaining. We're going to talk about asking for what you need up front before you communicate. We're going to talk about whether you have to be right in the communication, being open to someone else's perspective, and the check-in and repeat back. So 5-6 tools that could dramatically increase communication in your marriage, because sometimes you can love someone tremendously and have all the best intentions. Like, no one goes down the aisle and says, I'm gonna divorce this person in 5 years. Yet, it happens more often than not. So the intention is, I wanna stay connected and in love and have this fairy tale marriage, and communication is one of those pieces that can drive a tremendous wedge in your relationship. And so right now, I want you to think about, what are the things that you complain about? Just take inventory of those right now. What are the things that you complain about in your marriage? And then what are the things that your spouse complains about in your marriage? Because what I've come to understand is that a complaint, underneath this complaint, is a cry for help of an unmet need or an unmet expectation. And so oftentimes when complaints are brought into the relationship, like, you said you were gonna be here at 5 and you didn't show up, you don't care about me, right? Underneath that is, man, I miss you. But oftentimes when someone hears you said you were gonna show up at 5 and you didn't, they say, well, I'm providing for the family. Like, what am I supposed to do? Someone called me, right? And it creates this back and forth. And so complaints are opportunities of communication for you to connect, but it drives a wedge between most people. And so the next time your spouse complains, could you be willing to listen for what's underneath there? Or you could say, hey, I hear that you're frustrated. So this is a repeat back what I had said in the beginning. I hear that you're frustrated about me not showing up. I hear you. Yeah, that could suck. Like, can you put yourself in someone else's perspective? I'd be frustrated too if you said you were going to do something and then you didn't do it. What can I do now in order to be with you? Or what can I do now in order to help you? Or what do you need from me now so that we can move past this? And so then you would have to be open to being wrong, or you'd have to be open to the other person's perspective. So I just talked about 3 of the tools really quickly in that. And so, are you open to someone else's perspective? Or do you go into all communication that you're right? Are you constantly proving that you're right, even when you make mistakes? Like, are you willing to own your shortcomings? And the reason why I was unwilling to own my shortcomings for a little while in our marriage is my identity was in what Skylar thought of me, right? My identity and my worth and how I felt about myself was in him, because in my childhood, I decided that in order to get love, I needed to be perfect. And so if I'm not perfect in my marriage, right, then I'm not going to be loved. And so it was very, very hard for me to not own my mistakes, because underneath there were insecurities in me. And I was unconscious to some of these insecurities. So I want you to think about, for you, when your partner brings, hey, this is what I need for you, or this is where you've fallen short, do you take that personal and make it all about you? Or can you see some of your shortcomings or your faults and own up to them and be imperfect in the relationship, but willing to improve? So one of the things that's dramatically helped us, and I just messed it up on the phone with Skylar 10 minutes ago, is asking for what I need up front. Men and women are different. As a woman, sometimes I just need to say things out loud. And Skylar's different. He can figure it all out in his brain, he can journal, and he is just clear. When I try and do that, oftentimes I will keep looping, right? And so when I go to talk to Skylar, I need to say, hey, I'm frustrated right now, and what I need is for you to just listen to me, please. Or, hey, I'm really stuck right now. Can you help me with a solution? So those are two different things. And if I don't ask for what I need in my communication up front, oftentimes his go-to is to solve the problem. And that's not a bad thing. That's how God designed most men. They're problem solvers in life, right? But in a marriage, when that's unconsciously happening back and forth, you can see how it would create a lot of tension. And that used to create frustration in me that Skylar was trying to change me all the time. But as I talked to him over and over, or that he was trying to control me. And as I talked to him over and over, he's like, look, I see a hurting person, you, whom I love, and it seems like there's a very clear solution. So I give it to you. And sometimes that's not what I need because I feel unheard in those situations. So it's my responsibility, or it's your responsibility, to share what you need up front so that your partner can meet it. Because if not, getting frustrated at the end when they don't meet it doesn't do any good. And that's where communication can disconnect us. So one connector is by asking for what you need up front. Another thing is sharing with your feelings leading. And so I could, going back to the scenario where Skylar gave me advice, right? When I shared something that was going wrong, I could say, your intention was to do this. Like, your intention was to hurt me. Your intention was to control me. Your intention, right? Versus, hey, when I shared that and you said that I should just do this, it felt like you wanted to make me wrong in that, or it made me feel really ucky. Like, it felt like you were judging me in the situation, right? So sharing the feeling versus blaming or accusing of something can be received completely differently. So when I share the feeling, I'm then open that, is that right? Hey, was that your actual intention? Because that's the story that I'm making up, is that you're trying to control me, or you're judging me, or I should be doing it your way, or you're comparing us. I can create lots of stories, right? So for you, when there's a mismatch in communication, are you clearing it right away? When you start to begin to shut down, or you start to get big, are you checking into that real time with your spouse to say, hey, I'm getting angry at you in this situation. Can we dial it back for a second? Something must have been triggered in me. Or not only are you checking into you, but are you paying attention to your spouse? Do you notice when they start to get big? And can you calm the situation down to say, hey, I notice you're getting frustrated. What can I do right now, right? Can you be attuned with each other enough to know when communication is going awry? Or do you start out like a small tornado and then just you guys cycle off and can't stop it? So one of the ways to help with that is to share your feelings and not criticize or blame or say or assume things about the other person's intentions. One of the great learnings I've had from Skylar is to assume that his intentions are positive. So I didn't have that frame of reference growing up. I am constantly checking into, am I safe, right? Is this person for me? Are they against me? Are they going to leave me? Are they going to love me? And so it took a reworking and intentionality for me to assume that his intentions are good. And if you're married to a Christian man, oftentimes his intentions are good. Now, sometimes they can be motivated selfishly, right? Or they could have their own interests that they're looking out for. But often their intention isn't to harm you, right? It might be for them sometimes and not fully for you, but it's not to harm and to inflict harm. And we'll talk about revenge, but most often, it's for good, right? Especially in that scenario where he's trying to give me advice for something. So are you open to sharing your experience and not assuming something about them? Also, another tool would be to be open to their perspective, right? Are you open that you might not be right about the scenario and that someone else can have a different perspective than you do in the situation? They say that when there's a car accident that happens, there can be two people in a car, and if you interview both people, they have completely different perspectives. And that's how it is in marriage. And sometimes we forget that our perspective isn't the only perspective. I used to expect my spouse to respond like me, to see things like me, to do things like me. And guess what that created? Lots of disconnection, lots of frustration, because he was constantly feeling judged. And so are you able, when a spouse is frustrated about something or communicating something that you might not want to hear, are you able to look at their side and see, I wonder how they could be feeling that way? So that's a great question when you're in resistance to something that's going on with your spouse, checking in. I wonder why they could be feeling that way. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with how they feel, but can you let them feel seen and heard by being curious and seeing how someone could possibly feel that way? That will go a long way if you're willing to put yourself in your partner's shoes and see it from their side. Because guess what? If they don't feel heard and seen long term, guess what baggage they carry with them in marriage? Tons of resentment and bitterness. Tons of it. They have all these little moments of not feeling seen, not feeling heard, and that turns into bitterness. And then sometimes that moves from your everyday life into your intimate life. And then that's why we see people that when their kids move out, they don't know each other. They don't even like each other anymore because they've had so many disconnects in their communication that they're like, I don't want to be married to you anymore, right? And so are you willing to put yourself in the other person's perspective and check into some of the stories that you might be creating about the other person? The last tool that I believe is phenomenal and that slows me down. So if you're someone that takes things personal and kind of makes things about you and has a hard time, maybe has a perfectionist strain, has a hard time hearing feedback, what I need to do is repeat back what he's saying to me. And it slows down my brain. But before I can repeat back, I often need Skylar to ask me, are you open to feedback? And then I know, I'm like, okay, ground myself. This is going to be about me. And then if he says, hey, you've been distant and cold with me lately. Okay, you're saying I've been distant and cold with you lately. And the first thing I'm doing is checking in. How could this be true? And when I was emotionally immature, I would have been like, nope, that's not true. 100% no, right? And I'm already being distant and cold in my response. But as I got okay with me not being perfect and knowing that conflict can bring us closer together, okay, I can see how you might be saying that. And so I'd love to hear what stood out for you in communication. So are you asking for what you need in the conversation? Are you willing to share your feelings and not blame them for something? Are you willing to repeat back, see their perspective, and see what's underneath a complaint? Let me know what stands out. Definitely share this with your spouse if you want to improve communication. This could be a tool where you guys can pick one, and for the next week work on just one of these things, but with the intention like, hey, I want to have the best marriage possible. I want to send this, and would you be willing to work on this with me? I know that we're disconnected in this area and I'm making mistakes in this area. So if you own it, right? Don't just share this and be like, hey, buddy, you got a lot of stuff to fix, or lady, you got a lot of stuff to fix. But own, like, hey, I noticed I've been making a lot of mistakes in this area. I'd love to improve this. Can we talk about this video? Would you be open to me sharing some of the things where I might need you to step up? So I can't wait to be connected with you. Make sure you comment, let me know what stood out. And if you're not following, definitely subscribe and follow. See you soon.